In the past 6 seasons, the Chicago Bulls have won a total of 1 playoff game. This core is now in year 3 together, and it may finally be time to break them up, but it shouldn't come as a surprise. The writing was always on the wall that this could be the defining season for 2 reasons. 1, this is Demar DeRozan's final season. Since Chicago Bulls and DeRozan's camp couldn't come to terms on an extension, they either have to look to trade him now or potentially risk him just walking away for nothing as a free agent next offseason. And number 2, after this season, the trade rules get a lot tighter. Once this regular season ends, teams that are over the second apron will no longer be allowed to aggregate salaries in order to take back a larger salary. And teams that are over any apron, the first apron or the second apron, will no longer be allowed to take back 110% of the salary that they send out. So moving forward, they're only going to be allowed to take back 100% of the salary that they send out. So if you send out $20 million, you can't take a penny back more than $20 million. So now that we know that this could be the season that the Chicago Bulls decide to split things up, how are the dominoes going to fall? Well, the Chicago Bulls' main star is Zack LaVine, so all the trade rumors are going to focus around him. But I think it actually starts with Demar DeRozan. DeRozan's in the final season of his contract, whereas Zack LaVine still has at least 3 more seasons under team control. Demar DeRozan this season is making $28.6 million, and he's still extension eligible, which is an important footnote because it could impact the timeline by which the Chicago Bulls need to trade Demar DeRozan. You see, if a team is looking to trade for DeRozan, they're also probably going to be interested in signing him to an extension to avoid him testing free agency next offseason. However, once DeRozan's traded, for the next 6 months, the extension that he can sign is going to be capped at 2 years and around $61 million. However, if he can find a way to wait out that 6-month period, then he'll be eligible to sign a maximum extension worth around 4 years and $180 million. Now, that's not to say that he is going to sign that type of extension, but this is DeMar DeRozan's last large payday. He's currently 34 years old, so he's going to try to maximize salary dollars as well as years. So because of that 6-month window, DeMar DeRozan and his agent Aaron Goodwin are going to do everything that they can to make sure that he's traded before December 30th so that he can wait out that 6-month period and then sign an extension without having to test free agency. There are 3 teams that I think could be in the mix for DeRozan. The first team that come to mind are the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat can put together a package of both young assets along with draft capital, so I don't think that they have to settle for a package for just DeMar DeRozan. I think that they can actually look at a package that includes both DeRozan and Alex Caruso. Together, DeMar DeRozan and Alex Caruso make about $38.1 million. So in return, Miami would have to send out at least $34.6 million. A package that would make sense for the Miami Heat would be a package that includes Kyle Lowry, Thomas Bryant, and one of their young players, either Jaime Jaquez Jr. or Nikola Jovic. In addition to that, the Miami Heat could include up to 2 first-round picks, the 2028 first and the 2030 first. Now, that's not to say I think that they need to include both. I think that probably one of their young players along with one of their first-round picks should be enough to get that trade done. They would also have to wait until December the 15th because there is a restriction on Thomas Bryant. Another team that I think could have some interest in DeMar DeRozan are the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, without including Austin Reeves, the Lakers don't have the young assets that Miami does, and they also don't have the draft capital that Miami does. So I think the package that the Lakers would be looking at wouldn't include Alex Caruso. It would just be a package looking at DeMar DeRozan. Now, DeMar DeRozan this season makes $28.6 million, so the Lakers would have to send out at least $26 million in order to acquire DeRozan. The best package that the Lakers could put together for DeRozan would be a package that includes D'Angelo Russell, along with Gabe Vincent, and 1 first-round pick in 2029. Now, they'd still have to wait until December 15th because there is a trade restriction on both D'Angelo Russell and Gabe Vincent. However, that's still before December 30th, so by making that trade, they could still sign DeRozan to an extension in late June. Now, if they restructured that trade to include Rui Hachimura instead of Gabe Vincent, they wouldn't be able to execute that trade until January the 15th because of a trade restriction on Rui Hachimura. Now, obviously, that's after December 30th, so they wouldn't be allowed to wait out the 6 months and then sign DeRozan to an extension. It would likely mean that DeRozan would end up becoming a free agent. Another interesting note is that D'Angelo Russell this past offseason, when he re-signed with the Lakers, he would have been eligible to get a trade veto in his contract. Anytime you re-sign with your team and you sign a 1-year or a 1+1 contract, that contract comes with an automatic trade veto. In the recent CBA, they made a slight adjustment to this, where if the team and the player agree to waive that trade veto, they could remove it from the contract. D'Angelo Russell did agree to remove that trade veto from that contract when he signed it, which tells me that he knows that there's a pretty good chance that he could be traded this season. And the third team that I think could have some significant interest in DeMar DeRozan would be the New York Knicks. The New York Knicks are likely not going to be in the mix to trade for Zack LaVine, and I'll get into that in a little bit later, but they definitely could be in the mix to look to add DeMar DeRozan. A trade package that would make sense for the Knicks would be Evan Fournier along with Isaiah Hartenstein and 1 first-round pick. The Knicks currently own all their future first-round picks, so even if they were to move 1 first-round pick, they'd still have control of 6 more years of first-round picks. The only problem I see with this is that it could potentially put the Knicks in a position where they're over the tax and even over the apron next season if they retain both DeRozan and Immanuel Quickley. Now let's look at options for Zack LaVine. Zack LaVine, the 28-year-old two-time All-Star, is finally on the trade block. Over the past 5 years, he's averaging 25 points per game. He's a dynamic scorer, and there's going to be a lot of suitors for him. If a team can add Zack LaVine as their third option, that's going to put them in a prime position to be a contender this season. This season, Zack LaVine is making over $40 million, so teams are going to have to send out a significant amount of salary in order to acquire Zack LaVine's contract. The team I think that's going to be the favorites to land Zack LaVine are the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers have shown significant improvement over where they were a year ago, but the regular season has shown that they're still a level below the elite teams in the Western Conference. They're still way too dependent on LeBron James, and he likely can't keep this up for a full 82 games. Now, right now, it's been suggested that the Lakers aren't interested in moving Austin Reeves, who's on one of the best contracts in the NBA, but the Lakers don't have a lot of other value to offer without including Austin Reeves. So I think that if they're serious about getting Zack LaVine, it's ultimately going to cost them Austin Reeves. Now, the one major advantage that the Lakers have, and one of the reasons that I think that they are the front runners, is because Zack LaVine's agent is Rich Paul, and he will likely do whatever he can to get Zack LaVine to LA. This is what a package would look like for the Lakers if they didn't include Austin Reeves. That package would be D'Angelo Russell, Rui Hachimura, Taurean Prince, Jalen Hood-Schifino, a 2029 first-round pick, and 2 pick swaps, one in 2028 and one in 2030. In return, the Lakers would get Zack LaVine, Torrey Craig, and Terry Taylor. That trade doesn't have a ton of value for the Chicago Bulls outside of the draft capital. However, if they include Austin Reeves, it goes from a mediocre package to a really strong package. The package with Austin Reeves would look like this: Austin Reeves along with D'Angelo Russell and Rui Hachimura, plus the 2029 first round pick and 2 pick swaps, the one in 2028 and the one in 2030. In return, they would not only get Zack LaVine, but they would also be able to get Alex Caruso as well. Now, this trade can't be completed until January the 15th, so they would have to wait a little while. Another team that I think that could be in the mix for Zack LaVine are the Golden State Warriors. The Golden State Warriors can put together a package that includes both young assets along with draft capital. Now, if they make a play to try to get not just Zack LaVine, but Zack LaVine and Alex Caruso, they'd have to send out about $36.4 million. But with Chris Paul's $30 million contract on their books, it wouldn't be that difficult for them to get there. Golden State could send out Chris Paul's $30.8 million contract along with Jonathan Kuminga and Gary Payton II. They could also include Moses Moody if they want to strengthen their offer as well. In addition to those players, they could also send out 2 first-round picks, one in 2028 and one in 2030. And in return, they would not only get Zack LaVine, but they would also be able to get Alex Caruso as well. And the third team that I think could be interested in Zack LaVine are again the Miami Heat. A package that would make sense for Miami would look like this. They could send Kyle Lowry along with Jaime Jaquez Jr. and Caleb Martin. Put those players together along with both first round picks, one in 2028 and 2030, and I think that would be a pretty competitive package to get Zack LaVine. Now I'm quickly going to touch on 3 teams that have been rumored, but I don't think makes sense to get in the hunt for Zack LaVine. The first team are the Dallas Mavericks. If a team's looking to acquire Zack LaVine, they're looking to bolster up their offense, and that's not really what the Dallas Mavericks need at this time. The Dallas Mavericks have gotten off to a really hot start, and they're currently the number 2 offense in the NBA. There isn't a significant need for Dallas to acquire Zack LaVine, and if they did, it would cost them a lot of their depth. In order to acquire Zack LaVine, it would cost the Dallas Mavericks Jaden Hardy, Josh Green, Rashawn Holmes, and Tim Hardaway Jr. The next team that's being rumored to be in the mix are the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, there's 2 problems with the Philadelphia 76ers getting involved in a trade for Zack LaVine. The first issue is that Philadelphia doesn't have a lot of young assets that they could package in a trade for Zack LaVine. Aside from draft capital, which they really don't have a lot of, they don't have a lot of assets to throw at Chicago to make a competitive offer. The second problem is Zack LaVine may not be the answer to their problems. With Tyrese Maxey on the floor, the Philadelphia 76ers have the number 1 offensive rating in the NBA. Without Tyrese Maxey on the floor, they have the worst offensive rating in the NBA. What that tells me is that they need to really address the backup point guard position. In addition to that, they've also been rumored to be interested in players like OG Anunoby. I think filling out their roster with a backup point guard and a role player like an OG Anunoby would be a much better package for them, aside from just going big name hunting for a player like a Zack LaVine. And the last team that's been rumored to be interested, but I just don't think it's going to work, are the New York Knicks. Zack LaVine's represented by Rich Paul of Klutch, and Klutch is the second biggest agency in terms of salary that they manage. Klutch also represents over 30 players, and it's not a coincidence that not even one of those players plays on the New York Knicks. You see, Rich Paul used to work under Leon Rose back in 2006. He worked under Leon Rose at CAA for 6 seasons, and then he left. And when he left, he took with him LeBron James, one of their biggest cash cows. And following suit were a couple of other stars as well. And because of that, it fractured the relationship between Rich Paul and Leon Rose, who's currently the president of basketball operations for the New York Knicks. And as reported by Mark Berman, Rich Paul has told Confidants for over a year that he prefers not to have a single client play for the New York Knicks. And what further fractured that relationship was back in January of 2022, when Cam Reddish, who was a client of Rich Paul's at the time, was traded from Atlanta over to the New York Knicks. Cam Reddish was on the Knicks for a year, and the Knicks gave up a first-round pick in order to acquire Cam Reddish. And a year later, the relationship didn't work out. They actually had to package him with another first-round pick in order to acquire Josh Hart from Portland. And when Cam Reddish was asked about his time with the Knicks, he said it had nothing to do with basketball. It was all politics, all the favoritism, shit like that. And because of that history, it's highly unlikely that Zack LaVine's camp is going to let him be traded to the New York Knicks.